Hello, and welcome to Badaboom. I'm Troy. On today's episode of the podcast, I talk with Max Hoven. Coming off the success of his first co-written book, It Eats What Feeds It, Max and co-writer Aaron Crow team up again with illustrator Gabriel Lumazark for a new story. Liquid Kill follows sadist-slaughtering vigilantes as they encounter pure evil in a blood-soaked cyberpunk future. Listen in as we talk about the creation and inspiration behind Liquid Kill Volume 1, which is available for pre-order. Bada boom! Hey Max, how's it going?
It's going good. How about you?
It's going well, man. Thanks so much for your time today, taking a couple of minutes out of your day to talk to us about Liquid Kill Volume 1. I'm excited for the whole trade to come out. I've got like some bits and pieces of it over the last week or two, but it's gonna be good for I think a lot of people to get the whole volume all at one time. Uh, how did you guys come about with like writing writing Liquid Kill, but also like getting it together? Because I know you had another really great book, which if you haven't read it and you're listening, It Eats What Feeds Us, or It Eats What Feeds It, was a great
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
So how did you like come together with making Liquid Kill? And also like, I know that came out with a different publisher and this is with Massive. How did you guys come about with like creating the book, but also working with Massive on it?
Yeah, I'll
It's a
give
loaded
kind of the
question. It's a long
spiel.
question.
There's a lot of steps in between, but I'll start all the way back. Before I ever started writing comics, or my co-writer Aaron Crow started writing comics, we went to high school together. We actually met in high school. We kind of began our creative juices. We were both humor editors for our high school newspaper because they couldn't find actual editor roles for us in our journalism class. So they were just like, well, you guys both tell jokes. You can be the humor editors. And we ended up making movies and stuff. And we actually really bonded over trying to write movies. And after we both went our separate ways and kind of traveled the world and went to college and did a couple other things, we reconvened back in our hometown, St. Louis, and we started writing movies. And we had a little bit of success writing screenplays, but really, we decided out of nowhere to sort of combine stories that we had written as comics in a way, or envisioned as graphic novels, and we started to take that seriously. And in that process of stories, one of them was a old story that I had sort of sent to Crow as, hey, in a perfect world, if we got the opportunity to write like a hit like IP that already exists, this is what I want to do. And it was an origin story for the Mortal Kombat characters of Scorpion and Sub-Zero. And that was sort of on the back burner, that just kind of thing. Uh, and we kind of never thought that would turn into anything. But with our first book, It Eats What Feeds It, with the success of that, the artist that we worked with, Gabriel Lumazark, he said, hey, there's only really one other story I want to work on right now, and that's a cyberpunk uh, story. And Crow and I were really not quite stumped, but we were like, well, we have one, but it's sort of, and I had we had like sort of restructured it to where it was no longer associated with Mortal Kombat. Um, because it was always supposed to be its own thing, and then towards the end, all of a sudden, there's a metamorphosis of a few characters in this story, and by the end of it, they're truly transformed emotionally, I guess, like their full arc and physically.
Mhm.
And that was sort of the reveal, was like, oh, and this physical transformation that this person has become is characters like from Mortal Kombat, but it's not a part of what would be considered that universe. Um, in the way that we like took from the lore of that, it was really just sort of its own independent story. We restructured that and basically pitched it to Gabriel and said, here's basically what we have, but this is a really epic, insane story, and it's pretty dark and it's pretty heavy, has a lot of um, intense themes from human trafficking to organ harvesting and kind of a lot of violence. And Gabriel originally was sort of not for that, but he said, I think if we adjust a few things around, let's go for it. And that that's sort of the short version of how it came about. But there's a lot of different things that, when it comes to the story structure, that Crow and I extrapolated from our own lives, and a lot of that was I used to work at hotels, and there was mysterious rumors about rich people, and Crow was researching a whole bunch of stuff, and we basically came up with this whole, I guess you would say universe, but just epic, epic arcs of multiple characters. And so this story, this first volume, is you're basically following a small group that are just trying to rescue one person from their team, and you slowly are realizing who these people are, where they come from, what they're a part of, and what they're up against. But we deliberately kind of throw you in the dark, and hopefully, if this series can continue, you learn more about where we're at the further you go. Literally, it's a physical story to where you kind of start off in this water, and then you're taken to this hotel, and then you're taken underneath the hotel. And this first arc is basically just at the hotel on the surface. And then as we continue into volume two, you'll start to go below. You'll start to see the how it coordinates to the greater uh, villains and overarch geopolitical dramas that are going on in this realm. But we wrote this epic thing, and we just decided we're gonna do it super step by step and make it very tight, all in one location, basically, for this first volume, following one character. But once the mystery is revealed, it doesn't just reveal the mystery of this one story. It pieces sort of all the loose ends together, if we can get there.
If we can get there, yeah. No, I think that's a really smart thing to do. Like I know from talking to different creators that have come on the podcast, some of them that like Massive has connected us with, the one of the like threads I've seen through a lot of the writers and a lot of people that they've connected us with is there's a desire to hide the details per se. Like one creator said something along the lines of like no one knows who Darth Vader is at all in the first two issues of Star Wars. Like you don't know who he's Luke's dad until later on, and that's like the biggest plot reveal. But
Yeah.
despite that detail, you're so bought into that story that it makes you even more like that payoff is worth so much more when that happens later on. And for this to just be like one small part of the bigger universe, and like you said, you're going to reveal details as you go. I think that's just like one of those great kind of unsung storytelling techniques that we kind of don't really appreciate sometimes as readers, because we're only given what you tell us and we don't necessarily know like everything kind of going on. And so when there are those little Easter eggs or clues, we're like, well, what is that? What are the Clone Wars? What's this person's role in it? They're there for some reason because it's important. If we don't question those ourselves or have those little details, it's not necessarily like as interesting. But like the fact that you're dropping these little details and you know it's a bigger picture, it just means it's going to be more of an exciting read, and it's going to be easier for people to follow that storyline, because when it's that whole volume, you're not waiting for next week or next month to find out what happens in issue two. Do I need to go back and read issue one? You can sit down and read it all from start to finish for this first arc.
Yeah, and it is a fast read. I have a bit of trivia that relates to the Star Wars point that you were making. So supposedly, whenever George Lucas was making Star Wars, he and a bunch of friends, which is really interesting to look back on now because these friends are some of the most famous directors to date. But he was showing the movie sort of the uh, unreleased rough cut to his friends like Steven Spielberg and Brian De Palma. And at one point they all sort of we're just like, this great movie, but we don't know what's going on. And Brian De Palma said, "Why don't you just at the very beginning of the movie just have something on the screen that says in a galaxy far, far away, something, 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 sort of explain where we're at, and then let us go into there." Which was just sort of an offhanded, like, just kind of try to explain it at the beginning, and that became this epic scrolling thing that we now know of as the opening of the original Star Wars. Um, and how that ties to our book is a very similar thing happened is once we released Liquid Kill issue 1, almost everybody even sort of said the same thing where they're like, I get it, but can you at least put something at the beginning in the opening that says more than just USGS in the year? Can you say something like, and so actually for this trade, we did add in a few things to the trade volume that were not in the floppies when they were initially released. One of them was in the very opening, we have a similar to sort of a narration of one of the characters that sort of gives an understanding of where we're at in the world,
Mm.
and not just totally thrown in. You get a bit of a background on who we are, where we're at, and why they are going where they're going. Um, and then we also added sort of like a not bubbles, but we explain locations throughout the story, almost like a map. Excuse me. So that because we jump back and forth a lot, we jump to there's certain this members of these teams are moving into a building. They're tactically going from top down, sort of overthrowing, this hotel, taking command of it room by room, sort of wing by wing, and some go up, some go to the back, some go to the right, and some come from a boat, and we jump back and forth to what these characters are facing. And so to explain everything, we sort of say at the bottom left of the panel, we're in the sanctuary, we're in West Wing, we're in and they have interesting as you go further into volume 2, it's even more insane because you're not just in what seems normal, you're in layer upon layer of these epic sort of nonsensical futuristic layers of labs and um things that sort of have to be explained because visually it's not obvious. So
Yeah.
we added that to the trade as well to make it just a bit more fun and clear. Um, and so I just thought that was interesting that you can't just totally throw someone into a story, I guess, because you have to have some, even if it's as simple as in a galaxy far, far away. It you'd still need that because you're just thinking like, is this Earth 2? Who knows what time period is? And we're in the same way where it's like, okay, they're on Earth, but it looks weird. It looks different. The characters, are they human? What's going on? So we sort of just in basically four bubbles explain it all.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I'm glad like those labels are going to kind of be there because I feel like that sometimes helps us as readers kind of create our own idea of what the hotel and everything kind of like looks like. And then you can kind of just pull the rug from underneath us and reveal other details or we're like, whoa, I didn't know this was like part of that room or part of the environment because it's just not something you've told us yet. It's like enough detail for us to kind of create our own lore about the situation and the book until you give us more, and then we kind of get to have our expectations reset, and we can build that hype up again.
Yeah, it is. Writing this stuff and trying to translate it into panel by panel is so it's very difficult, honestly. Like because you have so much in your head, like we have it mapped out. And then Gabriel Lumazark literally created maps to explain because the whole story is very action oriented and it's very logical in the sense that the only reason they're here is because of this thing that happened and if this door is blocked, well that means they have to break through another door. These like that kind of stuff is what's going on. And in just a few panels, it's really hard to showcase all of that, and so you have to struggle for what to focus on, and it can sort of. very action oriented comics, there aren't that many. You know, there's a lot that follow fight scenes and things like that, but when it comes to almost video game esque of commonly going down the same corridor and secret entrances and things like that, indicating, you know, in a video game, it's almost like things are highlighted
Yeah,
to you know, or just invisible things are made visible to the game player, but not necessarily to the per the avatar in the game. And you have to do the same thing with comics in a way to where uh, and sometimes that takes you out of the moment or it just makes it, and so that's what I think the labels help with a lot of that kind of stuff is it brings it more into, oh, there we're back in this room but we're from this angle, because visually you also make it almost poetic in the sense that we're going back and forth of this character shoots that person, now we go top view of that person getting hit, and if it's and at the same time, the style of it is you might not want to make it super detailed at this portion because you want to make it more impactful when we make it super detailed of the epicness of the room they're in kind of thing. And so it's just a lot of back and forth, and it's nice when people appreciate it, but it's also really upsetting when people are like, I just don't can't tell what's going on, and it's like, dang it, I was so close, you know.
yeah. Well, I know you worked with Gabriel on It Eats What Feeds It, and I love the artwork in that. Like, it's a great read. Like, I think I read it maybe like 10, 15 minutes, but the artwork itself was what really drew me into the book. And the way the way he drew like the characters and the monsters and the whole swamp and stuff. And this is a very different setting from what he drew for that book. So what's it been like working with him in this futuristic style as opposed to the Louisiana Bayou?
Yeah, it's been a lot more imaginative, I guess you could say.
Okay.
With It Eats What Feeds It, we went and found pictures of the trees in the bayou, what the architecture of the mansion would look like, samples of houses that we could use. Once again, sort of maps of where it might exist in Louisiana in itself. A lot of actual references to the real world were used. And then when it came to the more fantastical elements of It Eats What Feeds It, like when they go to the island with the witch on it and stuff like that, that was another one to where it's very hard to explain sort of, you know, we use references and scenes and examples of things like Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's like you're in the water, but you're in this sort of overflowing jungle that places like that aren't really don't really exist in the real world. So it's like you're taking fantasy elements, um, but then showcasing that in a movie, you can slowly pan as like you're in the canoe. That's almost like doing a 360 of this is where I'm at, and these are the characters as they're entering, and you can have a frame of reference of the character and then how big the trees and everything are behind them, or how dark it's getting with just like a light at the end of this tunnel kind of thing. Whereas in the comics, you're doing all that in basically 4 or 5 panels, and that's why when you read that comic and this one, it reads very fast because there's very few panels because it's heavy on the surroundings and the action. There's there's not a lot of people talking, and there's definitely not a lot of back and forth. It's and there's not much narration, and whenever people are talking, it's not you're not it's super demanding. These characters, when they talk, all they're doing, like the sort of the unique aspect to these characters in the story is the main characters are only interested in their goal, and they don't have drama amongst each other. They don't have drama outside of in a greater conspiracy. There's no greater thing going on outside of their realm other than if you get in my way, you die. Like it, and so whenever they're making statements, they're not asking questions. They're not trying. All they do is say, who are you? And can you help me? And if you say no, they kill you. And so a lot of all they're saying is just threats, statements, demands. And there's no room for someone to argue with them, because as soon as someone argues with them, they rip off their arms and throw them down tunnels. And like they're just, that's all that. And so that's, it's very hard to it reads very fast because of that, because they're not talking very much and it's just action, action, this, that. uh so when it comes to with Gabriel working with that, he loves it because that means it's art focused, and
Yeah.
we give him a lot of room to where whenever we wrote the script, it's kind of one of those. I If you read Alan Moore's on he had like an article that turned into a short book on writing comics. He explains how the more panels, the slower the read. And so if you read a lot of these, most comics are 5 to 6 panels per page. Sometimes even 8 or 9 if they're doing like, kind of thin cut things. Ours are averaging 3 to 4. And so whenever we wrote it, another callback to George Lucas, whenever he was explaining the math or the pacing of Indiana Jones, there's a transcript that's famous amongst screenwriters that you can read where him, Spielberg, and Kasdan, who was the screenwriter for Indiana Jones, they all were in this big meeting where they basically hashed out Raiders of the Lost Ark together in this one long day. And it opens with Lucas just explaining, he's like, there's two ways we can do this. We can do, I don't remember the exact number, but he's like, we can either do this as a serial that's 30 scenes of 5 minutes long, or we can do 15 scenes that are, 8 minutes long, or however the math was. And he was like, I suggest we do it quick. So we're gonna do and nowadays that structure that they essentially invented right then and there is the pacing of the modern blockbuster. So when you watch um especially in the 90s and early 2000s, a classic sort of Jurassic Park style action movie or blockbuster kind of film follows this. Die Hard is a famous example of one that every 11 minutes there's like a crazy, that's like when the next catalyst or plot point happens. And it's visibly seen in Die Hard where someone calculates that every 11 minutes somebody shoots somebody or at least a gun or something
Yeah.
happens or there's an explosion. And in the same way, whenever we were writing Liquid Kill, we were kind of like, okay, with it eats what feeds it. We wanted it to be more poetic in the sense that you're basically just seeing one long scene for the first issue, and then a lot of time go by in the second issue, and then one long scene for the third issue. Which in hindsight, we could have expanded that middle issue into more to where it wasn't just as condensed, but a lot of it isn't just storytelling. You have to think about the money you're spending. Essentially, there's a budget just like movies to comics, and every page costs a certain amount of money. So you're basically being like, okay, if this page is costing me $200, you know, what all do I want to put on this page? And you can either try to condense a whole lot of story into a smaller thing, or we can expand it out and, make it more impactful on the issues that you're seeing. And we tried to do sort of an in the middle. So what was originally going to be a very long ongoing thing, we tried to condense smaller. Um, and we basically plotted it out and we're like, okay, instead of doing 6 panels, we're going to stick to our four, 4 or 5, some with 3, a lot of splash pages and things like that to make it different in a way, to make it clear that this is sort of an action comic that's not as common as most people would read, which is a risk in itself because most people are used to a certain style of pacing and a certain style of story, um, or at least like a way of telling the story in comics. And ours sort of breaks that while keeping the same overall. There's still a cliffhanger at the end of each issue, kind of thing. But Yeah, it's a lot of back and forth. And the difference between It Eats What Feeds It and Liquid Kill was n- we didn't exactly know how it was going to work with Gabriel originally. So everything was scripted super in detail. Uh, every panel had, I want to say, probably multiple paragraphs of explanation of what was on it and where the bubble was placed, how big the panel was. With Liquid Kill, we gave a lot more freedom to Gabriel to determine a lot of that stuff. Um, and mainly because we found out in the making of It Eats What Feeds It that there's just so much that it, in your mind and the way you describe it, once again in a money thing, it's kind of like, well, this would the artist figures out that this would be better if we focus on a certain thing on a certain panel rather than the way we wrote it. And we gave him full creative control in the sense that we explained it as like, you're the director of this. This is the script, but you can adjust things around as needed. And so in the sketching process, that's where most of the time goes. Is it's the same as storyboarding a film, to where you're really trying to see visually how everything's going to be laid out on the page, panel to panel, flip to flip. um, and then once that's figured out, then it's just him fine tuning all the details. And it's a crazy long process, though. I think when it comes to the full from start to finish of just this volume, the we started on this in 2021. It's now, halfway through 2024.
Yeah. That's a crazy process, but also like the relationship that you have with Gabriel and the amount of trust that you guys have when it comes to, delivering the vision that you guys have. That's amazing. I don't think artists often get like enough credit for their work in comics, because we talk a lot with like the writers, and sometimes we take the art for granted at times, but it's really, I really like admire and appreciate like the relationship that you guys have with Gabriel, because that's just the collaboration you guys have is really inspiring. Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I talk about it on my own channel. Is That's the only way we would have gotten Gabriel to work with us. In the same sense that, you know, comics is sort of our moonlight night job for Crow and I, or writing in general. We both have day jobs. Gabriel Lumazark is his pen name. He's a different person. He has a day job as well. Um, and he's not going to take on work from fairly, especially when we first started working with him, unknown writers, uh, to do something that is rushed with not a publisher attached. It the We had to choose a story that we all bonded on and said there's no time frames. Like, this is our passion project. Um, and now that that worked and we're more established in the industry, we're all now juggling more and more work, and it's actually burdening the joy from it in a
mm,
sense that what most artists go through is actually you're constantly under time pressure. You don't get to redo things that you think are messed up or wrong. If it goes, if you once you send it in, it's in, and then it goes in the book and goes to print. That way, you have no time to go, oh, I wish I could have adjusted this, there, or that. But with working with Gabriel, we said we don't want any of those kind of time constraints, even whenever we start to get published and things like that. And that's where we're at now. And luckily, Massive has been uh, very lenient and helpful on that as well, to make sure we're not under any time pressure either. It's really up to the only people giving us pressure is the audience themselves, who are just like, we want more, we want it now. And it's just like, it's to make a comic of this status, so to speak, or this detailed, this epic in a way, is a very tedious process. And we could do it faster if this is all we were doing. But please, fans, understand that this is what we do at night. Whenever we could be spending time with our family or going doing other hobbies, we're making these books. and we put a lot of effort into them. And so yeah, any time pressure just makes it not as enjoyable, and we'll just want to stop if it ever gets too burdensome.
Yeah, I feel like, like with subscription services and so many things are just like on demand now. It's like the ability to wait for something seems like it's a little bit harder than it was like back in the day. Like I remember, oh, this is a monthly issue. A month is like enough time. But now sometimes when I'm like, oh, I wish this was every week because the issues are so good, there has to be like that understanding of it's only good because we've had the time to make it that good. And
Yeah.
if you want it right now, it's not necessarily going to be good quality. So there has to be like, that understanding from the audience. Um, but I was wondering while you guys were doing like Liquid Kill, uh, you guys chose to do like an entire all female team for the book, which I thought was which is interesting. I don't really see too many books on the shelves that it's entirely like maybe there's like one or two female characters, but this is like every character on the team is female. So what made you guys decide to say, hey, let's do this entire book with just like all female characters?
That was another way of branching out to be unique, and it was also the suggestion from Gabriel, in the sense. So the original storyline is, in short, it's one guy that's recruiting slaves throughout the world. People that have been, if you imagine a universe where everything is really kind of horrible, to where everybody is sort of slaves, and the class structure is where it is now, but super extreme. So imagine as if uh, the rich are also more and more evil, and it's in the open. And so, in the sense that if you're a leader of a country or a president, politicians, they are also known to everybody that almost like they are kings because they are evil. And at the bottom, when you're a slave, like it is known that you are a slave and you are choosing to do what you do. And not everywhere is like that, but there's a character that's basically going around, and when if you think of a world sort of like this bad, it's like, and it's everywhere. Who is there? Who's going to help us if it's so rampant? You have to have very sort of evil people also trying to overtake those that are evil as well. And that's, this character is going around basically freeing slaves, and or not just freeing slaves. This is sort of lore for the future, but also recruiting other evil people. So imagine as if you are, uh, if you overthrow somebody and who has a crime operation, cartels, and these cartel members are known for being ruthless. That's how they got their power. Well, if I overthrow you and I entrap everyone in a part of that, and I give you guys a choice, it's basically I kill and torture you, or you join my army to kill and torture the people I choose to have you kill. Like, and so some of the people on this squad were also serial killers that are now forced to sort of join this legion to kill other serial killers in a way. So they're super hungry for blood in a sense. But we kind of scrapped a lot of that part because Gabriel's so affluent to drawing the female body in such a beautiful way that we were like, let's utilize that. And Gabriel was like, I would love if you guys want to make all the lead characters women that were basically child slaves, instead of these everyone's sort of a mosh posh of some people were slaves, some people were boys, girls, some were serial killers. Like, let's just make it clear that they're all sort of this thing. And we restructured it to, because like I said, this was originally based upon kind of an origin, a Mortal Kombat origin story. Um, but yeah, so it was really a lot because we wanted to utilize Gabriel's great artwork, and we like the way, and he likes to draw females. So we just drove through that and just slightly adjusted the storyline to not be as totally all evil characters. There's still that same mentality from these characters in the sense of how they do things, um, but we just eliminated that. And also, that was another thing we got feedback from the audience was they're just like, it's just everyone in this story, everyone is a sadist. Like you can't have everyone be this bad, and it's just like, all right, we'll keep them all bad, but we'll make them females. You know, like, uh, and they're not all sadists. They're just badass in a way.
Yeah, I feel like that's often how like some femme fatale movies where like everyone's bad in those movies, but like somehow like the heroine does just as bad stuff sometimes, but they're like, no, they're the good guy. So sometimes that like, that's just how the movie or the story goes.
It's hard to draw. The way I explain it is, I mean, when you're in the real world and movies, you with movies, you can never make nobody likes to watch things too real or too extreme. Like when things get too bad, if the bad guys are too bad, we just don't like to watch it. Or if they're doing something that's truly evil, um, it's just it crosses the boundaries to where it's no longer fun to enjoy. We want the bad guys to be Darth Vader. You know, we don't want the bad guys to be somebody that is using child labor in Congo. Because that's too real and too extreme. It's not fun.
Yeah.
So whenever you're writing characters that are that bad, or if you're thinking about it, the hero, when you start to piece together, like how do you defeat? If you think about it in the same way with comic books, if Superman has this power and this weakness, you're starting to piece together this. But whenever someone's superpower or they're the thing that gives them competitive advantage to where they're a super villain is a realistic, just ruthless brutality. Um, the only thing that can face that, unless you give somebody superpowers that makes them, you know, shoot lasers or something that can just win over a lot of the things, what they need is sort of an either like another form of evil in them that makes them to overpower the evil there. And what gives somebody that ability is they usually have to go through extreme scenarios or have a bit of meanness in themselves as well, which is what causes drama that we like to see of you know when they finally get some morality in them to where like something finally hits their line of that they don't want to kill innocent people, or the classic you do I kill one to save five, or do I just let the five die, or however I'm thinking of it wrong, but it's just like those kind of dilemmas are what you're trying to write. And in this story we broke the barriers, at least as you read further on, to where it's not uh, and you still have to keep it fun to where it's not too mean and too extreme. But in writing how the characters, at least like what makes them battle this out and win, and like their overall arc or their overcoming in a sense, that's I just couldn't see a way to do it without making them mean about it, or it's just like I don't under in real life, if someone is trying to take over a school and steal all the kids, the parents aren't just going to let that happen. And if they call in the army to help them out, the soldiers are going to kill a lot of people and they're going to be mean about it, like. And it's I don't know, it's hard to make that kind of scenario entertaining while also being realistic in a way. So we hopefully hit a balance the two out.
Yeah, I think that's definitely tough. Like, I think in some confrontations, there's a little bit of a mirror of ourselves in them, and you need to have like that. The point I feel like you're like hinting, you're getting at is like there's that point in those conversations where you're like, is this going to be a reflection of me or of the person I'm having the confrontation with? Like which one's going to kind of win out? And then am I going to behave like myself who I want to be, or am I going to be just as bad as the other person has been? And that's like what's really tough about writing those confrontations, because like there needs to be like it has to be black and white at times, but there also has to be like enough gray that like makes all the characters kind of like relatable and present in there, I feel.
Yeah, this story is a catharsis of uh who who saves us when things are really bad. Did you ever see the TV show Narcos?
Yeah.
Do you remember at one point uh the I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically like the government was like, we don't know how to take out these cartels. We don't know how to take down Pablo Escobar. Our army's not working. There's political things against us. Like we don't really have any other options. And one guy's like, I have an option for you. I have a group of mercenaries that are evil, and they're going to start hanging people from bridges. And they were like, we can't do that. Like because that's against the government code. Like we can't be evil. And they were like made it this covert underground thing where it's basically there's all throughout history. That's how things work in real life. Is governments can't do the evil acts on their own, so they hire pirates, they hire mercenaries, they create religious fanatics and groups and stuff to do these terrorist acts for them to take out their enemies. Well, whenever that stuff goes awry, who's left, when all the evil's taken or spoken for or is only concerned about money? And whenever you're watching stuff in real life, like when you see a true bully, you're always like, and especially in movies or reading comics, you're like, why do they ever argue with these people? Like the person just clearly kicked an innocent person. Um, everything you can see of they just imprisoned somebody for no reason, or they could have been set free from jail, but the warden lied and just to keep them in as slave labor. And you just want like who's going to take a revenge out for us? So it's like these characters, you can feed all your emotions into these people because that's what they do. Is like that is they're the ones that they like you're saying they take what's morally you might not be justify in your own mind. Like I can't actually beat up the bully or kill the prison warden, but there's somebody that could, and and they're justified in doing it, and you get that feel good feeling whenever they go through with it. But as with all karma and great power comes great responsibility. With that power, also there are times where it's like they will go too far and they have moral dilemmas as well. And that's what you're witnessing in this story is even though they have that ability to sort of take emotion out and they just focus on the goal and they take out only the evil, at one point when is evil too bad, or when is someone just had a bad day, made a wrong decision? And when if we're all shaped by our environment, it's the same in the reality to where you can't blame somebody that's struggling to feed their family that might rob somebody in a fit of they have no other option. That's different from somebody that is deliberately doing something for fun, like being evil and hurting people. And who's making that call? And when do you make the wrong call? And when is and that's where you're writing it into stories is it's that's the beauty of it is it's sort of up to the reader to decide in what scenario it was justified.
Yeah, and everyone's going to be able to kind of see what scenarios are justified by the team in Liquid Kill, because the volume one is going to be coming out in August, correct?
At last I checked, yeah, it's set to release August 27th, I think. August 28th.
August 20th, almost September. But where can everyone pick up that volume? Is it going to be in shops, or is it going to be like just online for massive?
It will be everywhere. So if you have a local comic shop, You can order it through your comic shop because it's being distributed by Diamond Distributors through the comic shops, same time as it's being distributed through Simon and Schuster through bookstores. So if you want to pre-order it now, the pre-order time frame I believe is till the end of this month, so like another week or two. And then at if you don't read comics regularly and you just go to bookstores and you get trades, you can order it on Amazon. You can pre-order it on Amazon right now, and I can give you those links. But if you do go through your comic shops and they do ask for the code, I have it right here. It's JUN for June, and then the number is 241035. There's also a limited edition that they're only doing 1,000 copies of Tony Infante's cover, and this is still for the trade. And there's another code for that one, and it's the same thing, JUN 241036.
Hmm.
It's one number higher. So there's two different versions you can get if you want that limited edition. And yeah, they can go to their local comic shop. They can go to Amazon. They can go to Books A Million. They can go to Barnes and Noble. They can go to, there's different websites online like freshcomics.us. There's comiccity.com. There's State of Comics Online, which I think is just stateofcomics.com. And those websites usually have like a deal, like you can get a 10% off or 20% off.
There you
And of
go.
course, after all that, you can get it through massive website. But yeah, it's virtually everywhere. I just ask, please, guys, like the print run is dictated by how many people pre-order it because that's how they determine how many people are interested in it. And then they do some math calculations of if this many people are interested in it, we can assume a certain amount are probably actually going to buy it or might also be interested in it. But without those pre-orders, they lower the print run, and then what happens is what happened with It Eats What Feeds It is all of a sudden if the book is good and there's word of mouth, well the those people then go to the comic shops and say they want it, but there's no more left. So they have to do another print run. But the smaller the print run, the more expensive it is per issue. So I don't make as much money off of the books, So if I can get a lot of demand and if I can get 5,000 people to pre-order it and they print 20,000, that's a lot different to where if I get 500 people to pre-order it and they print 3,000 and then I sell out of those 3,000, and now if they do another print run of 2,000, I'm not really making enough money back, or not just me, but like the whole creative team.
Yeah.
It's just a massive uh for everybody that doesn't realize it, kind of like what I was talking about in the beginning, is a lot of people that read comics don't realize that this business, those of us that create them, it's almost pure hobby. There's very few of us that are making any real living off of this. And those that are, it's a constant grind because comics are only a few dollars, and we're literally making fractions of 10 cents per one of these issues as a writer or an artist. After the publishers and the retail shops, they all take their cut, plus with discounts you're just really cutting into it. And if you don't print that many and they charge you $2 per book instead of 45 cents, it makes a huge difference down the line. Sorry for rambling. Please,
I no
guys,
no.
just pre-order the book.
Yeah.
It's as simple as going to Amazon or calling your local comic shop and just add it to your pull list.
Yeah. Name of the game is pre-ordering, and we'll have those links and those codes in our description as well. So you can make sure, if you missed it in the audio, don't have to rewind it. You can just check down there, get those links and get those codes for getting it online and pre-ordering it wherever you can get it. So that's for pre-ordering though, but where can we keep up with you and keep up with updates that are coming out for Liquid Kill?
The main website to go to is hovencrow.com. That's HOVENCROW.com. That's the website for Hoven Crow Entertainment, which is the parent company of everything that I do. So I run a YouTube channel that's called Indie Comic Empire. I also have books on how to make and market comics. I had a course, but I deleted it because wasn't getting enough demand for it. But I have everything there. It also, if you join my email list, you get all the updates of all of our books, all the limited editions you can get. I send out signed copies to people that reach out to me of any extra stuff that I get. So people that are hardcore fans of the series, if they go to hovencrow.com, they join my email list, they stay in the loop, or they follow me on YouTube. I'm constantly weekly putting out new stuff. My on all my socials is at Lord Max Hoven. Um, and I'm on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. What else is there? Facebook. I'm not active on social media because I have a million things that I'm constantly trying to do. I do it just enough to respond to people and post new things, but it's not like I'm putting out like thesis or, like Twitter, I should take advantage more of, like actually talking to people, but it's just so,
It's time
it's
consuming.
weird and hard. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I
Like,
don't get into anything. Like there's nothing that people talk about that I read it and feel the need to respond to it. Like if I do, it's because they're reaching out to me directly, or I just feel I have to engage to keep myself relevant. But it's just like I don't get into anything to where it's just like, whoa, the new thing's coming out. Even movies and comics that I love, it's not like I get, oh my goodness, like I have to say something or anything that's on like Twitter or politics or anything. It's just all of it is just irrelevant to me. And so it's really hard for me to get on there and actually care. I have to force myself to do it.
yeah, that's totally fine because that's like why you got people like us that do the podcast, so we can be like, hey, here's all the cool stuff you can check out and share. You don't have to worry about engaging. You kind of just like do that.
Hey,
But
thanks a lot for reaching out and doing this then, because yeah, you saved me from actually being a sociable person.
no problem, Max. Well, Max, thanks so much for coming on. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait for the trade for Liquid Volume 1 to come out, Liquid Kill Volume 1 to come out, and then to see what comes next with the entire universe you guys have created.
Heck yeah.
And with that, bada boom.
Bada boom.
Thank you for listening to the Badaboom podcast. Keep the conversation going on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Get in the comments on our YouTube channel and let us know what you'd like to hear next. And please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen.